Hello, this is Daniel Sinclair, and we are in the creative studios of Green Room 97, which is located at 2997 Fifth Avenue in Columbus, Ohio. We are here in the Green Room with the Green Room's owner, Larry Hawkins Jr., and he is also producing our second episode of Voices of Inspiration. On our last episode, we were fortunate enough to have Vicky Fichette with us, who gave us a very strong message of survival, and we're fortunate enough to have my friend, who's been my friend for some time, long before the incident, uh, Reverend Dr. Johannes Christian. Welcome to Voices of Inspiration, Doc.
Thank you so much, Mr. St. Clair. I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And we're just excited about being able to share with you today.
Okay. Would you share with us um, the incident itself? Just tell us about the incident, if
Well,
you will.
for those who don't know, and for those who do, maybe just a slight reminder. In 2001, I was driving on I 70 between Dayton and Springfield on the way back from Peoria, Illinois. I had a young man, foster son, in the car with me who was 15. And about 11:30 at night, there were three young men up on top of one of the overpasses over the expressway. And they'd been dropping rocks on cars as they passed under the bridge. They had hit a car just coming down the road ahead of mine, hit the back end of the car, and startled the driver. The car was swerving all over the road, and um, the two of the young men said to the young boy who was throwing the rocks, "We need to get out of here, because they're probably going to call the cops. The cops will be here, and then we'll get hauled off." And um, the other kid said, "Well, you need to stop throwing them because you're going to kill somebody. Stop throwing the
Hmm.
rocks." And Jacob, the young boy that was dropping the rocks, turned to him and said, "You just don't get it. That's what I'm out here trying to do. I just want to kill somebody."
Mm.
And
Mm.
a few moments later, I came down the road, and um, he dropped his last rock for the evening, and it dropped 100 some feet and came through the windshield of my car. And the only thing it hit was right in the center of my face. It just left a big hole. Everything in my head was crushed. All the bones were crushed to like sawdust. And I lost both my eyes, my nose, and um, the ability to use my mouth at that time.
Oh my goodness!
Uh,
Did the car wreck?
no, it did not. It would have had I not had the young man, Brian Rainier, in the car with me. I affectionately call Brian my angel because he, once he figured out that I was no longer in control of the car, he reached over, grabbed the wheel, and straddled the console to this Cadillac and um, maneuvered the car off the road. I had the cruise control on. He disengaged the cruise, and he guided the car off into the median. And
Mm.
we didn't hit anything, not even a marker. He just stopped the car, saved the day.
Oh, what a brave young man!
Very, very, very smart. He got out, tried to wave down cars, but nobody was stopping in the middle of the night for a little black boy. Nobody was stopping. But
Okay.
he got back in, found my cell phone, and called the 911. We were literally yards away from the state troopers barrack,
Oh,
which is
okay.
amazing that these
That did.
kids were that close to a state troopers barracks throwing rocks.
Throwing rocks. Yes,
But
yes.
they were there to rescue me within minutes.
Mm.
and get the squads and stuff there. So, but no, we didn't wreck. We didn't hit anything. But I was so grateful. Um, poor Brian had been harassing me the whole trip because at 15 he just knew he could drive and he had
Mm.
skills and he kept telling me he could drive and drive and drive and I just wouldn't let him. And after that happened, of course, I was so grateful that he
Yeah.
wasn't the one behind the wheel.
Yeah, brave young man. Yes, if he had
Yeah,
been the one behind the wheel,
you
yes.
don't know what story that would be.
So you started to mention the damage that the rock actually did to your face. Tell us a little more about
Yeah.
that.
I think a lot of times when I tell my story, if I don't tell the whole story, people just think, well, you just had a little knot on your head or something.
Mm.
But this was a 8 pound rock about the size of a cantaloupe, and just a little smaller than my head, really. And so when it hit me straight on, it literally smashed every bone
Mm.
from the top of my head all the way down to the middle of my mouth. And the plastic surgeon, when he was working on me, he said he was just like digging out pieces, and it was just like digging out sawdust,
Mm.
trying to get all the broken pieces of bone
Bone
out
and
of my
mass.
yeah yeah.
Yes.
So as he put me back together, it took over 40 surgeries to put me all back together over about a 2 year period of time.
What do you
So,
first recall in coming and
mm,
regaining consciousness?
the first thing I remember was my children standing around me, and I was kind of woozy going in and out, but I was cognizant of the fact that something had happened. I
Mm.
didn't know what or to what extent, and I went to feel my head, and of course my daughter stopped my hand and said, "No, you don't want to do that." And so they began to explain to me that I had been hit, and um, and they really had restraints on me so that I couldn't uh, touch my head. And
Touch yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
evidently, I really had some episodes where I was trying to pull the
Mm-hmm.
cords and things out of my, because I didn't know where it was and what was going on. So they had to restrain my hand so that I wasn't pulling stuff out. They never told me, um, they explained I had been in an accident, but they wouldn't tell me what I looked like or the extent of my damages early on.
Mm-hmm.
And when I asked, well, how bad is it? They said, well, it's significantly bad, but you're going to be all right, you know. So this was probably maybe 2 or 3 days in that I really was able to converse. Uh, and of course, I couldn't see, so I thought I just had bandages on my eyes. And
Right. So, what were your feelings um, as you gained realization as to
yeah,
how damaging the situation
well,
was?
remember that I couldn't talk either.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And you couldn't
I
talk. And
couldn't talk. I did have a trach, but
okay.
it did have a cannula in it, so it meant it didn't make any sounds.
Okay.
And
So you're there with no sounds. You can't
right,
communicate at all.
no, finally, they said, well, let's get him a pen. So they got me a pen and a little tiny notepad. They had to get some bigger paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could write somewhat, and so I was able to communicate that way by writing. Um, and I guess the fear, I think, would have been the first thing I felt
Mm,
was
that's natural.
afraid of what is this? Where am I going to be all right? And the pain level. And of course, they were giving me morphine and stuff to keep my the pain down,
Mm.
and so I wasn't making a whole lot of sense. Um, Shock, maybe that I was in a state of shock. I didn't know what on earth had gone on. But I felt comforted by the fact that all of my children were there.
Okay, you
Um,
could hear their voices.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I could see, I could hear their voices, and I could feel their touch.
Ah,
I could feel their touch. They all, touched. They all, as best they could, hugged me and you know, assured me that I was going to be all right and that they were there.
mm-hmm. That had to be a very emotional time with you and your children.
Later on in my recovery, as I got stronger and um, it was really hard emotionally on all of us. And I wondered, because the kids would only come in and be with me for a little bit, and
Mm,
then somebody else would come in, and then somebody else would come in, and they'd go out and come in. And but I could tell that everybody was still sobbing or, trying to hold back tears. And this was, like I said, a couple of days in. I don't remember how long. But when I began to piece that together, I said, listen, you tell everybody out there in that hallway, come on in here. And if we're going to cry, we just all going to cry together.
you want to all cry together,
We
huh?
just going to cry together. We don't
Uh,
have to spare me. Obviously, this is going on, and if it's enough to make you. So we just had a good cry together, and we talked
I-
about, you know, um, we were laughing earlier about Father to Father, the group you and I were working with
yeah.
years ago. But we practiced some of the things that we had talked about. Being real with each other, talking
Mm,
talking things out, sharing our emotions, and so we did that day, and then of course I had brothers and sisters. They were coming in. My mom was still alive then, and mom was mom. She'd come in and take the chair right next to my bed, and she'd reach up under the blanket and pull my hand out, lay it on the cover, and she just would sit there
then pat
patting
you.
my hand,
Yes.
and she'd just look at the monitors, and she said, "You're gonna be all right. You're gonna be all right."
Mm,
And whenever the monitors changed, Mom would tell the kids, "Look, look, look, it's getting
mm.
better, getting better." And so
Well, that was wonderful that you had the support of your family
hmm
in such a stressful situation.
yeah,
Uh,
all the way through, all
yes,
the way through,
yes.
even long after,
Mm,
um, the kids rotated. Even the ones in Colorado, they figured out how much time they had, how much time they could spend. George, he left college, he came back home to watch me after everybody else, you know, had done what they could do. And my youngest just stayed right there with me. And then, of course, we figured out how to get assistance through my medical insurance
mm.
and Medicaid. And, so I began to have an aide and a nurse at home and those kinds of things.
Okay, Doc, can you tell us a little bit about not a little bit, this is the main thing. Tell us about the process of forgiving this young man.
Wow. Yeah. You know, a lot of people think that forgiveness is just a one time shot that you do for the person that has victimized you or hurt you.
Mm,
But I figured out and found out that that really wasn't the case. And um, a lot of people think that maybe you do things for others to see. But I really need to be honest that the act of forgiveness was not about Jacob. It was really about my family and I. Um, and it wasn't something to be public, it was really something private.
okay.
Um, I realized the amount of anger and that my children were feeling, the anguish that they were feeling, the natural response to, man, if I could just beat this kid up, I would feel better. You know, and I realized that wasn't the way that they needed to respond, and it really wasn't the way I needed to respond.
Mm,
I had my moments of, I didn't understand what happened, but, I really, really wanted to just lash back at this young man And yet I knew that that really wasn't the right response.
Yeah, but that seems that was a natural response.
It is a
It
human
seemed, yeah,
response. You are
human
so right,
response.
and you're natural. You're right, but I know it wasn't the right one. It
Wasn't the
wasn't the
right
one that
one. Yes.
would represent me as the man of God that I had been for at that time 20 years, because I started preaching in 1970 and this was 2001. Um, it
Mm,
really wasn't what I thought God would expect from me. Um, and so as I laid there in the bed, I could really hear, you know, spiritually, God reminding me of His Word that we needed to do unto others as we would have them do unto us.
mm,
We needed to forgive those who trespass against us as we uh, trespass against us as God would have us to do. None of that was making sense because I'm like, you ain't the one laying here in the bed. You
and
talking
you had
about
said those
forgiveness,
words.
Jack.
You had said those words many, many times.
Many times, preached many sermons on the Lord's Prayers, and you know, but looking at my kids and looking at me, and we needed some kind of
Yes.
relief from where we were, and I felt like God was telling me that I needed to forgive Jacob, and um, did I really understand? Not really, but I knew that that's what He wanted me to do, and so finally we had to go to court.
Mm,
The court hearing kept getting postponed and delayed and delayed and delayed, but finally we had that day when we went to court, and even that day was late. Um, the court hearing, we were in the courthouse, but they kept holding up starting. And so we were there at like before 9, and somewhere around noon, we finally got into the courthouse, into the courtroom. And I didn't really know what I was going to say or do. I had it in my mind, I thought, but I didn't know until the judge finally said, "Well, do you have, Mr. Christian, do you have something to say?" And all I can remember by that time, I still had the trach, had to put my finger over my hole so that the air would come through my mouth
mm,
to make some sound. And I just said, that that I wanted him to know that I forgave him and my family, and that we were going to trust that the court would do whatever the court felt they needed to do. But I was forgiving him and wasn't going to hold anything against
mm.
him.
That was so powerful. You
And
stood in court and talked through the track and told them that you forgive them.
yeah,
And you also addressed his family.
we did. We addressed his family. I think it was more outside of the courtroom, but I could just feel the anguish of parents not knowing what to say or what to do. Their son practically killed someone and said he was trying to kill him, and you know,
Hmm.
and so we just leaned over and gave her his mother and father a hug, and let them know we were praying for them, um, and just left it at that. We it wasn't up to being mad at them wasn't going to change nothing, and
Yes.
calling them out of their name wasn't going to change nothing, and you know, but it was the beginning of a healing process for my family and
Hmm.
I. It was the beginning where we could move on from that situation. It gave us a sense of closure.
Uh,
Um, it gave us a sense of closure, and we were able to move on, um, which was important for me and for my family. Um,
okay. And how has Jacob fared after this? Have you continued communication with him or?
all while Jacob was in prison, I continue. Well, he sent me a letter when I was in the hospital, and it was really mixed up. But the crux of the letter was that he was sorry and that he wished he could trade places with me, so that he would feel this pain and not me. And you know, I know that it was sincere, but it wasn't going to change anything as far as I was concerned. He wasn't going to get to
Yeah.
climb up in the bed and take the pain from me.
And take the
So,
pain. Yeah.
but um, it took some time after I got home, and one of the first letters that I wrote was a letter to him, encouraging him to make the best of this bad situation, to finish his education, and to um, kind of figure out how to turn his life around. Um, and again, to let him know how we felt as far as forgiving him and what I hoped that would do for him. Um, and so that was the first of several letters that I would write to him back and forth over a period of time. And then we had the opportunity to do
Mm.
a class called Victim Offender Dialogue, where we could take this class through the state of Ohio, and eventually we would have the opportunity to meet. And so, over a period of time, and I think it was over a year, but not quite 2 years, um, the day came when I could actually go to the prison and meet
And
Jacob.
actually meet him.
Hmm.
And how did that go?
Wow, that was a
That had to be
crazy day.
that had to be a very emotional day.
It was. It was. I tell people when I was getting dressed that morning, um, it was like felt like I was preparing to go to my own funeral.
Mm.
Have no reason in the world why my funeral, I
Yeah.
don't know, but it was just that dread. But yet at the same time, there was this highly emotional kind of feeling. And Bishop Fred Marshall, my pastor at that time, um, was driving me to the prison. And I remember getting in the car, and he and I tried to process all this. And I was ready to go, and then maybe I didn't want to go. And I was ready to
Mm.
go. And he said, but you don't have to do this. We can turn around and go home. And
Mm.
I said, okay. No, don't turn around. We're going to go. We're going to go. And so we finally got there, and um, we got there, we found out news cameras were not being allowed in the prison, and so the news media was outside. They were trying to talk to me before I went inside, and I tried to talk to them, but I didn't really know what I was going to say, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So when we got inside, and um, they seated me in the room, and Bishop and my counselors were sitting over on the side, and then they brought Jacob in, and it was like boom, like everything just stopped.
Mm.
Um,
I can imagine the tension in the room.
It was like, wow, this is the moment we've been waiting for. But man, it's just like, this is the killer across from me that wanted to kill me. Oh,
Oh, and how did that go?
it was interesting. We had to figure out how to break the ice, um, and so my first question was, "How are you doing?" And you know, and I wanted him to know who I was as a person. Um, because unfairly he was trying to kill me, but he didn't even know who I was, and
Mm.
he didn't know I was a dad. He didn't know I was a grandfather. He didn't know I was a pastor. He didn't know I was a son or brother or uncle. He didn't know anything, and so I wanted him to know that. And I had brought the pictures of what I looked like when they wheeled me into the hospital, because he
Oh.
didn't know the extent of the damages that he had done. And not in anger, but just as information for him moving ahead so that, if you're going to deal with this, deal with all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Deal with all of it. Um, And then, but I wanted to know more about him. I wonder, how did you get to the place you were up on the bridge trying to kill somebody? What made you think that was okay?
Did you get any clarity
I
from
did. I
him?
got that he was a very confused young man. He was a loner. He felt like God had let him down.
Mm.
Um, his parents mom was manically depressed. She was an alcoholic. Father was deranged outside of the family, and it was just a real crazy family situation. Um, he had tried dabbling with devil worshiping and uh, had pentagrams on his walls, and he had dabbled with drugs and
Oh.
was smoking pot and doing whatever other kind of drug he could do. Um, and all of that had come out in the trial or in the
Mhm.
inquiries, not the trial, because we really didn't have a trial. Um, but it shed light on where we were, you know.
Okay, so he
It,
was actually doing the devil's due, huh?
yeah. And
Yeah.
we took a break, and then the second half, when he came in, um, he let the counselors know that he wanted to talk first, um, and he expressed how he felt, how sorry he was, um, and how he felt like it was unfair for me to forgive him because he really shouldn't be forgiven. And um, and he said, "You've been saying that I'm a devil worshiper." He said, "But I'm not a devil worshiper." I'm like, "Well, this is what
Mm.
they said. I didn't say it."
Yeah.
And he said I was a devil worshiper wannabe, but I don't think I ever really got to be a devil worshiper. And I'm sitting there going, well, if you weren't doing the devil's deed,
What the devil's deed? What were you
what were
doing?
you doing?
Yeah.
Because I think Satan he was guiding the rock, like,
Yeah.
here, you drop, I got it from here,
I'll take it from here
and he
right
did,
in his
right
face.
into my face.
We will shut him up.
Uh, but
Uh,
um, I know he was being sincere, but at that point, it wasn't up to me to help him figure out whether he was a devil worshiper or a devil worshiper wannabe. All I knew is you hit me with the rock, and that was the
mhm.
craziest thing could have ever happened. So,
So how did you feel after talking with? Was there a sense of relief, or how
yeah,
did you feel
great.
after coming face to face with someone who tried to kill you?
Oh, that's a great question. I wasn't as emotionally distraught coming out as I was going in.
Okay.
I felt like a burden had been lifted because I was able to share the things that were important to me with him, and I was able to actually listen to what he wanted to share. Um, I felt like we could move on.
Mm,
Um, my doctors had said early on, even when I forgave him first at court, that the healing process in my body kind of was accelerated and things were
mm,
happening faster than they should have or normally would have.
mm.
And I think even after the prison visit, um, I felt more together than I had felt before. That
Oh
makes
boy.
sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
um,
you have always been a doer. There are talkers uh, and some people will talk the talk, but you definitely will walk the walk. So since that incident, um, you spent time as the president of Mobile.
oh yeah, the
You,
executive director.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, and you might explain Mobile itself to.
But Mobile is a center for independent living for people with disabilities, and their focus was on how to help people with disabilities be able to live independently.
Okay.
That's the main thrust of that agency. And of course, when I took it over, I had already been trying to live independently blind for a long time before I became the executive director at Mobile. And but it was like I think God opened up a place for me to be where I needed to be
A
because
platform for
I
you.
I wanted folk um, to know that even though our disabilities are somewhat limiting, that we served a limitless God, and
Mm,
that that meant that our lives could be limitless.
Ooh.
And and I try to live to
Wait a
that
minute. Say all
extent.
that again. Give me that again. You gotta
Well,
have that.
what we do,
Yeah.
we serve a God that
Okay.
we say can do anything. Well,
Yes.
the other side of doing anything is
Yeah.
to have no limits. Because if we
Mm.
try to say God can't do, then we've contradicted ourselves. So we have to be saying that whatever it is, God can do it. I don't want to put limits on him being just a he, but the Spirit of God can do whatever the Spirit of God wants to do, whenever, wherever, however. So
Okay.
if that be true, and we are part of the Spirit of God inside of us through Christ Jesus, then that means that we're limitless.
Mm.
Jesus said, "These things you see me do, you can do these things and greater." The Word of God says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." All means that there are no
No
limits.
limits. Whoa.
So,
Yeah.
if I want to get behind the wheel of my car and drive it,
Wow.
there's no limit. And I had a buddy who would take me out to the big parking lots at the closed down um, shopping center on the west side. And we
Mm.
spent one afternoon just driving around the parking lot.
You drove around?
I drove around.
Oh,
Made a
yeah. Yeah.
video of it even.
Oh,
And
yeah.
waved out the side of the window while
Oh,
I was driving my car.
yeah.
But uh, but my point was, as a director of mobile, people come in and they're trying to deal with having a stroke like you had to,
Yes, right.
and that's a whole life changer. It's a whole
Yes.
life changer.
Yeah.
But at times you had to say, I can do this. Remember you saying, I'm gonna get up and walk. I can do that. I can get up and I'm going to do that. Um,
Yes.
I can learn how to cook my meal. You know,
Hmm.
I may not have all of the use of all of my arms, but I'm going to be able to do what I can do.
Yes.
And so that was important to me. Um, and so just about everything I do, I always look at it. If this could be an inspiration to somebody else, then that's what I wanted it to be.
That's what we're
You,
talking about.
you know,
Now, that's what we're talking about.
hmm you
Being an
know,
inspiration to anyone else.
exactly. So to the young kids that came to my house, I continued to be a foster parent.
Hmm.
And I got just black teenagers, white teenagers, whatever they sent to me, I got them. But it was always about what can I teach them, what can I share with them that's going to make a difference in their lives. And
Mm.
for some of them 10, 20 years later, they're still coming back and saying, you saved my life, doc. Wasn't for you, I don't know what I'd do, where I would be. I said, well, I only I only grew what was already there. It was
Mm.
already in you. I didn't add nothing. We just kind of helped you polish it.
Well, God certainly gave you a greater platform, to spread His message from,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you do an excellent job of that, I might say.
yeah. I I
I
just
have to talk about the walk to Washington.
well, I got to tell you, the walk to Washington was not my first walk. It was
Yes,
the
right.
third big walk, and we had lots of little walks before it. But first was Cleveland. I walked to Cleveland, and then I
Mm.
walked to Cincinnati, and I felt like I'm done walking, so this is my last walk. And then we did the walk to Washington D.C. for 15 days, um, and I called it "Forgiveness and Reconciliation: Changing America."
Uh,
When I set that walk up, I was so disgruntled about the attitude of our country and saw the rise of white supremacy and division among um, trying to to separate our country and as though we weren't the United States, but we were more the separated states, and it just really aggravated me. And I felt like I needed to do something that made a statement that said we can forgive each other and we can reconcile our differences. And so that was the purpose behind walking to DC, was to raise that awareness and um, not, won't forget the walking into
Mm.
the federal park there in D.C. on that Saturday morning with the East High Band playing, walking in ahead of us, and ending up under the statue of Martin Luther King. And
Ah, yes.
there I delivered my address that
You
day
say the East High School Band
in
in
D.C.
DC.
Uh huh.
Okay.
Yeah, not the
Okay.
East High School Band from here, but
Okay.
they were just as good though.
Yeah, they were.
They were just as good. They were, but it was just the attitude that so many people came from all over, literally from all over, from Atlanta, from the Poconos, from um, Kansas City, from Boston. And I'm not even sure how everybody really knew about what we were doing because I didn't feel like we had as much coverage as I wish we could have had.
Mm,
But God knew what He was doing, and it was a great day, a great day,
yeah.
especially sitting underneath a hit Martin's shadow, because of course when Martin got killed, I was 18, and just starting to sprout, and everything about my ministry always kind of wanted to shadow what he was like. Um, a
Yes.
drum major for social work, for um, religion, and so I tried to do the things he did.
So, Doc, you're back in. Oh, well, tell us about your retirement home. Tell us about that.
But I retired from mobile. Well, I retired from the church a few years ago, but I was still working at the Center for Independent Living. And in June, I retired in 23 and decided I would go down to the Caribbean where my family was from. So,
Mm,
so I've been down there for the last 7, 8 months,
okay.
and
Where in the Caribbean?
it's a very small island called Saba, Saba, about 34 miles from St. Martin. A lot of people know St. Martin more than they would know Saba. And and it's just a laid back island. I've been able to be there and just kind of unwind. I didn't realize, sometimes I think you can be tired and don't realize how burned out and tired you are.
Mm,
So I spent the first couple months just trying to come to grips with my life at 73. What was I going to do? What was I, you know, um, But before I retired, Dan, you may remember, because I think you saw a piece of my work before I left. I started painting about the
yeah.
year before I retired in 2022. I started painting landscapes and different ideas that would come to my mind. And, um, and so I've been able to carry that out in the island with my coach, Lene Ashe. She's Artifacts is the name of her artworks, and but she would work with me via video, and
Okay.
I was able to. She was still able to coach me even through video while I was in the island, and just coming up this weekend, and I know the show will air after that, but this weekend I have my first art show where I'm presenting my artwork, 18 pieces I'm presenting to the world of works that I've done.
Oh,
And
amazing.
I am so excited. But, your people, as you say, share, can still go to my website,
Mm-hmm.
which would be www.johannes, Johannes, Christian, Christian.com. And
Okay.
they'll still be able to be a part of um, what my artwork looks like. And I think if I could just close out with a last thought,
If you would, please.
I just I want folk to really realize that wherever you are in life, it doesn't have to predicate where you're going to end up in life.
Mm,
That you have the ability to do whatever you set your mind to do. And so, whether it's a disability or whether it's just that you've been beat down by the world, you can raise up and be whoever you want to be.
I hear you. Well, I'm sure you've been a very positive influence on many, many people, Doc. And I certainly appreciate you coming to visit with us on Voices of Inspiration.
Hmm.
And I'm going to ask all of our viewers to follow us, subscribe to the show, and to share it with their friends
Mm.
and family.